The big loser in this trade, the fourth team in the 3-team trade, the Miami Heat have struck out quite a bit in the last few years on attaining that third big piece. They missed out on Donovan Mitchell. Now they missed out on Damian Lillard. Man, how much how concerned about the Heat going into the season are you guys?
Got to be massively concerned. Lost Gabe Vincent, lost Max Strus, didn't really replace those guys. Josh Richardson, okay, that's fine. Like last time he was good, he was in Miami, so maybe they
got number 0. By the way, they did get a number 0. So,
but you got to be massively concerned. Jimmy Butler's 34 now. Like there's a lot of stuff there. How's Tyler Hero going to feel about being in trade rumors the entire offseason?
Well, if his Twitter timeline is any indication, not great.
So I mean, you have a lot. Like I think there's a lot of stuff that they got to figure out there. But this team got worse. It's just that simple. This team got worse, and it's a big blow. And I honestly think they were a bit arrogant in how they approached this. And listen, last week I'm literally like, yeah, they don't have to do this. They don't have to negotiate against themselves. As soon as other teams started getting involved, they should have made a point. They should have just upped their offer. All the reports were they were trying to get Dame for the least possible they could, and they just never upped their offer. Part of that also is Portland answer the phone, but that's a whole different story in that regard. Like there's the people who are saying this is a spite trade. Yeah, there's some of that. I think Portland could have gotten 3 first-round picks out of this, legitimate picks, not swaps, out of this. But I think this is the thing where Miami has to actually put that on the table. And I think, you know what, even if they're not picking up the phones, there's a way to convey that message. And I think that's kind of the point, and I think that's the thing. I think they went about this the wrong way. I think they're screwed. I don't know what else to say, really.
Portland, the way Portland treated this, it reminds me of back in my legal days when you'd hear stories about people finding creative ways to like dodge being served process. It's like, nope, right. That's not me. There's one aspect of this Miami thing that I think has been overdone. It's like people, oh, well, this double screws them because now that loses their chance at Giannis too. I don't necessarily see this as maybe like to the extent that it increases the Bucks title odds to a degree. They might even be the favorite, but they're certainly more likely to not win the championship than they are to win it still. I think Giannis is still going to be we're still going to be talking about Giannis's destination up until he signs a contract extension or doesn't next summer. And the stuff that Miami would have traded for Damian Lillard, they can start there. So I think they're still in on like the next guy, whether it's Giannis or Embiid or whatever. So, run it back and temporize. I don't think it's a disaster. I also don't think I was as high on what they would have been this year had they traded for Dame. But as some other people were. So I think that's why I'm not seeing them as having like lost as much. Like they're still, they still got Jimmy and Bam and Spo, and they hit on a couple of the bench guys, which they seem to tend to do. Then they're right back there in the second round of the playoffs. It's like these guys are so damn hard to play against.
Yeah, I mean, I disagree with you on what Dame does for that team in that regard. I think they are legitimate title contenders, and his chances are higher, like I said earlier, with Miami to win it than it will be with Milwaukee. But I just think they're just in a bad spot. But the more important thing is, yeah, you're right. Okay, now we got to wait till Embiid demands a trade. And that's where the whole Drew Holiday, where does Holiday end up kind of play a role in this? And how does the Harden thing play out? Like, that could be in 2 months. Like, in all honesty, like that Embiid thing can pop off at any moment, really, in this instance. And they're going to have a shit ton of competition for that. Right? New York is dying and waiting.
That's the
New
Holiday
York
team.
has
I forgot
tons of stuff.
Yeah, New York is okay. New York would be fun for Holiday too, but New York, I think, is going to hold everything for Embiid. Like they are waiting for Embiid. I think it's for them. Miami, I don't know if they're going to be able to compete with everything that New York has. And same thing with like, who knows what happens with Donovan Mitchell? Like, there's going to be a lot of disgruntled guys. You guys thought I was going to get aggregated. Nobody aggregated me last week, but I still think Luka Doncic is a guy to watch out for after this season. I think there's a lot of possibilities there in that sense, but like, they also need to make sure they accumulate assets because this is the thing that's the most important thing. Regardless of what any of us thought about Tyler Hero, Portland didn't want him, and Portland didn't think they'd be able to flip him for what they're going to get. And I think that was the sticking point. That's the reason this trade didn't happen, and Dame's not in Miami. And I think that's the thing that's really hurting them. But I also think they needed to put everything on the table much earlier and not wait for the counter.
The playoffs were bad for Tyler Hero.
They lost people too. The playoffs were awful for Tyler Hero, but they also lost people.
Both because of how well they did without him, but also like, again, that player type performed poorly in the playoffs. If you look at the other high profile player of that type is Jordan Poole, and that's a player type I have questions about is this a key championship level, like a scored, not does a ton else, poor defensive slate two guard.
I push back on that for a couple of reasons. One, we've seen Tyler do this in the playoffs, in the bubble. We can talk about the bubble and all that stuff or whatever, but he did it. I mean, he hit the massive shot against Boston. I think he's taller than a lot of those dudes that scorer type stuff. He's bigger than all of those dudes. I'd like to see Tyler Hero tap into being more running off screens and almost a little bit Duncan Robinson-esque and see a little bit more of that from him. And it put that more into his game. I think he has another level above those guys. But yeah, the lack of defense is a massive problem, and it's a guy that gets hunted. Same for Tyrese Maxey, same for Poole, same for Simons in Portland. Like there's a lot of those guys all over the league with all of that stuff. I just think Hero has another level he can go, but he's done it in the playoffs. It sucked this playoffs because and we've said it. I don't think this team gets to the finals if Hero's healthy, but he has proven to be a guy in the playoffs that can succeed. And I think that's an important thing that we just tend to forget and ignore, whether it's because it was in the bubble or whatnot, or it's years ago, we just, fuck it, he sucks.
I mean, I don't think with that far, just as a centerpiece of a trade, it was just like, if he's a guy you end up with, it's like, oh, cool. But
to me, the centerpiece of the trade would have always been the three unprotected picks. That was always my thing with them, with this trade. Hero wasn't the centerpiece. The picks were.
Yeah.